I came running out because there was smoke pouring out of the building. I was like, how can the place be on fire?
Hey everyone, I'm Eric Beavers, the founder of Great Western Buildings. And in this series, I get the unique opportunity to speak directly with our customers and discuss their experience, their issues, and really most importantly, the detailed cost of their Great Western building. And I know that's a big thing out there. People want to know, how much do these things cost? And so today we're joined by Keith. I think it must have been 2018, I bet, something like that, maybe 19. But Keith purchased a 24 by 24 building from us and has some insight to share as far as the erection, the permitting process, the interior finishing processes go, and of course, what he spent. I'll turn it over to Keith real quick. Yeah, Keith, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Eric. Thanks. How are you?
Good. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm the director of IT for a commercial construction company, and I was a residential builder in a previous life. So I do have construction experience, which lend itself very well to this project. I do custom steel and metal welding and fabrication and woodwork, and the two don't mix in the same area, fires. So I finally convinced my wife that I needed a separate building to do the metalwork in, and that's where I started to shop around for a steel kit building. I came across you guys. I worked with one of your sales folks when we kind of spec'd out what I was looking for, and he drafted up a couple different options for me in terms of door placement, window placement, size of building, type of truss or bend systems within the building. And we settled on a building design and went from there.
Right. So you built a 24 by 24, and how tall was it?
It was a 10-foot sidewall.
And I remember I'm pulling up your drawings right now, actually.
And I think it was 3 on 12 pitch.
Is that all it was? I remember it being quite a bit steeper than that.
Yeah, it's maybe 4 on 12. It's not super steep. Certainly didn't match the 12 on 12 of my house, but.
Let me see if I can share a building or a picture of the building when it was complete. Let's see if we can find one. It's such a pretty building. Here, this is kind of the front of it. I thought I remember it being like a 5 or a 6 on 12. It was a 5 on 12. So
5 on 12.
For a pre-engineered metal building, it's kind of a steep roof. But,
wanted the snow load to shed off of it.
Right. Yep. Why 24 by 24, right?
So I previously built a stick-framed pole barn style wood shop, and I built that 24 by 24, and I was doing both the woodwork and the metalwork in it. So I figured it was a good size. I was able to work both in that footprint of a building, so that just seemed like a logical. It also fit pretty well in terms of where I placed it on the property. Didn't have to really cut down any trees or anything, so I also knew what my equipment was that I was going to put in there, so I had a mental idea of where I was going to place everything within the footprint of the building.
Right. And you have, okay, so this is your metal kind of workshop, and your wood workshop is the post frame building that you did previously.
That's correct. Yeah. I don't really like to admit it, but I set a couple small fires in the wood shop by not cleaning up the sawdust as well as I could have before I pulled out the plasma cutter, which throws sparks. And the wife finally said, fine, you made your point, build yourself another building. Don't burn the place down. So I figured steel, would be fireproof. I did a steel liner panel all the way around the inside of the building as well, which was a really nice feature that didn't add any real cost to speak of to the overall cost of the building. But that's fantastic because when I'm grinding or cutting, the sparks just hit steel. So there's really nothing flammable that the sparks can touch.
And I don't remember. I'm looking at the. Oh, we supplied the liner panel.
Yeah,
it's only up to 4 foot, right?
Yeah, I think it was a 48-inch steel liner panel.
Okay, and you have looking at the front of the building here, you have a garage door in the front. It's what is that, like 10 by 10 or 10 by 8? Yeah, 10 by 8.
I think it's a 10 by 8.
Okay, and then you got a personnel door in the side, and then or next to it, and then in the back you got a couple of 3030 windows.
Yep, 2 windows in the back, just a little air ventilation and a little bit of natural light. Didn't want to occupy the walls with too many windows just because it's a workshop, so wall space is valuable.
And you put a vent in the back, didn't you?
I did, yeah, to exhaust the fumes. I've got a CNC plasma table in there, which creates a lot of fumes. I put it in after the fact, so that was an afterthought. So it is in the back upper part of the gable end.
Okay, it's not in these pictures yet. And so,
yeah, I don't have a picture of it.
Right, and what the plasma table you have in there? What kind of plasma is that?
It's a 4 foot by 4 foot commercial grade plasma cutter. So with the torch that I have, I can do up to 1/2 inch plate steel on it pretty precisely. I do a lot of ornamental stuff, signs, things of that nature, but I also do custom parts and hinges and stuff for farmers and ranchers.
Okay. Yeah, you made me above my garage, the house in Larkspur, you made me that Beavers wood shop thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
it was a big thank you. You guys were fantastic to work with.
Well, it was much appreciated. It's still there. Unfortunately, I live in Grand Junction now, so I don't get to. When I used to pull in, I'd be like, "Oh man, that's so cool." Yeah, pretty fun.
Yeah. So this was a fun little project. I actually started it in 2018, but it I think November timeframe, and finished it in 2019. I did all the earthwork, the groundwork, and the foundation work early on. The permitting through the county I live in Colorado, they're a little bit particular. So I actually had to do a full grade on beam, footer, 18-inch deep, that tapered from 6 inches up to 18 inches to slab on grade for a pre-engineered steel building like this, which, to be quite honest, I think it's overkill, but it's what the county required. There's a ton of number 5 rebar. I had to tie it into a U for ground because of National Electric Code. So it's all tied into, the U for ground is tied into all the structural rebar within the slab and the footers. And that was just to satisfy the county.
Right. And something that with the pre-engineered metal building, it's not a tough shed. And a lot of people, have the idea that, sometimes if it's small enough, depending on the building authority, they won't check it or anything, and you can do it on what I call a hot tub slab. But really a pre-engineered building, because of the way that it bears on the way it bears, just in, I guess, on your building, and really just 4 points, right? Your building's just a single bay. If I remember
it's 2 bays.
Is it 2 bay? Oh, there's a middle span. Oh, that's right. There is a middle span. Really, in most building authorities, engineered foundation is required, and it really doesn't matter on the size. It adds a little bit of cost, and I think, I have a video about it where it just makes sense to do it. But you had two foundation designs on this, didn't you?
No. So I looked at the county specs and what they required, which I can't emphasize enough. If anybody's going to want to do this themselves, really, really get into what the code is in your area. I'm in unincorporated, so I'm slightly different than if I was right in the town. So setbacks are different, but really, really dig into what the codes are so you understand what's necessary. The time spent up front will save you countless days or weeks or months down the road in trying to redo stuff.
Right. So know what you can do, what you have to do, get that out of the way before you go to, have Great Western or somebody else draw up plans for you, and you submit it and you're rejected or something like that. Yeah,
exactly. Because once you're rejected, the plans get redlined and they get sent back to you. When you resubmit, they're at the bottom of the pile, and so it's a waiting game. And I think that's with any municipality, not just the one I live in. But since I'm in unincorporated, I had 25-foot setbacks on the back and sides and 50 on the front, which wasn't a problem for me. I'm fortunate to sit on 5 acres, so I had plenty of room. One of the things when I started to do the foundation earthwork that I didn't really anticipate, I rented a big trencher, and I was just going to trench that trench around to do the footings for the grade on beam, and I hit solid decomposed limestone that trencher just wasn't getting through. So I quickly took that back to the equipment rental place and bought a Mini X, and I just should have started there because that made a world of difference, and made pretty quick work of it.
For the foundation design, you went through you drew it up and then had, because you work for the big construction company, you took it down to the engineering office and were like, hey, throw a seal on this, right?
Yeah, I took advantage of my place and position. So I had one of our structural engineers take a look at the foundation, and they even said, Keith, this is over-engineered. I said, good, stamp it. And then that also saved me a little bit of time down the road because it was stamped that they were the engineer on record. I had the engineer come back out to the house after I had everything prepped before I poured the mud. They did an inspection, and they wrote a letter to the county saying that they inspected and it satisfied all design requirements. So I didn't have to have the county come out and do an inspection.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think usually the county just wants to see that engineer seal on there, a set of plans, and or the building design, and as long as there's a PE stamp on it, yeah, whatever, right? They're not gonna, they don't have the resources or the the skill set within their departments to really dive into that. And that's why they lay it off on professional engineers.
Yeah. If I didn't have the engineer write a letter saying that they inspected it, they would have come out, the county would have come out to inspect it.
Okay.
But that would have been scheduling an appointment, taking time off from work, meeting the engineer out here, the inspector out here. It was just quicker and easier. I bought my engineer a couple beers, and he came out and inspected it and wrote the letter for me.
So, all right. So the foundation, I'm looking at the thing. I guess we could just dive into the cost and stuff on this thing. But the foundation, excavation, and forming is what you wrote here. 1 day mini X or mini excavator, like a little miniature backhoe, just a Home Depot rental or something like that.
Similar, yeah. I didn't get it from Home Depot, but an equipment rental place.
Okay.
I forget the exact model, but it was like a 2-ton unit. So it was good for, actually, no, it might have been a 3-ton. But I got the narrow bucket with it. I had a choice of a 12-inch or, an 18-inch, and I went with the 12. And it made really quick work of it. So I don't even think I had it for the full day, but I rented it for the day.
Okay. You were able to do that entire, what do we call that, thickened edge just in 1 day with it?
Oh, easily. Yeah. Yeah. I even did some additional stuff around the house because I had it.
And so that cost $460 for the day.
Yep.
But you're able to get more bang for the buck. You're like, hey, I'll go tear that stuff down too and pull a scrub oak out or whatever.
Oh, exactly. I did exactly that, Eric. I had a patch of scrub oak that I had cut down several times, and it just kept growing back. So I used the Mini X to dig it up, and it hasn't come back since.
Perfect. The rebar in the foundation, material only, you did that work yourself.
Yeah, and again, benefits of place and position. I borrowed a rebar cutter and bender from work, and then I just bought the sticks of number 5 rebar, which is what was required by the county. So I was able to cut, bend, all that myself, and that took an afternoon.
Really, you're able to lay all that out in an afternoon?
Yeah.
Right? And then looks like a 4x4 welded wire mesh or something in there?
Yep, exactly. Again, that's what building code called for.
And then you set your own J bolt. It looks like these are J bolts.
They are J bolts, and that was probably the thing that I was most paranoid about. To be honest with you, Eric, I measured 500 times because I wanted those bolts to be spot on. I didn't where the beams land. I didn't know how much slop there was, in the holes that were cut or drilled in the bottom of the flanges for the beams. And it turned out not much. They're pretty tight tolerance. So I actually made templates for all 6 locations where the J bolts needed to go, physically fasten them into the formwork. So they're screwed right into place in that picture. So rock solid, rigid, even when the mud was poured. And then I just took those nuts off and then unscrewed the form or the jig that I made, and I was pretty happy. We flew those beams into place. I erected the beams on the ground, the full bents, and then I made a spreader bar and a boom spree for my neighbor's tractor because he didn't have quite enough lift. But we flew the full bents in place, and knock on wood, better be lucky than good, I'll say. They landed right on those bolts. I didn't have to use a come along to draw them in or push them out in any way, shape, or form. And there were 4 bolts per base.
Right. Yeah. And it is really critical to get those. I mean, the tolerance there, within the pattern itself, there's an 1/8 of an inch tolerance, but so you could have a little bit more slop, within the frame thing, but it's pretty dead on. It's if you're an inch out of place where like a house framer or something, they can work with that because they're cutting material, and they can bash it into place. The stuff that comes, pre-manufactured from the factory, it's got to be, if something's an inch off, you're losing that inch somewhere else in the building.
Yeah,
when you go to start erect it. So it's good that you spent a bunch of time there.
I was anal about it. I probably I was within an eighth inch of square on the foundation on the concrete.
Well, I was going to ask you how many when you said you measured it 500 times, which is maybe an overstatement, but how many adjustments did you make after you had them set and you're pretty sure they were right and you kept rechecking?
I made quite a few. And then I would walk away from it and I'd go have dinner or something because I work a full-time job. So this was mainly nights and weekends. It could have gone up a lot faster if I just, took 2 weeks off, but I'd walk away and go have dinner. Then I'd come back out and with fresh set of eyes and a full stomach, and I'd measure it again. and I took all kinds of measurements. It was, diagonal distances between the first and the last bent, diagonal distances between the first and the middle bent, and horizontal measurements across the bay, and again referencing the plans constantly just to make sure that I was going to be spot on. And again, I'm very, very happy that it came out the way it did because they were spot on.
So how much did you spend on the rebar and the anchor bolts?
It really wasn't that expensive. I don't know, maybe $250, $300. I will say that the price of steel has gone through the roof. So that $200 on material only would probably be closer to $600 right now.
It's coming back down.
Is it?
Yeah, it'll never get back to where it was, but
no,
inflation. Rebar in particular, what the crazy thing was, not to get off topic, is we, for a lot of our big commercial stuff, we do mezzanine systems, the second floor, so it's open web bar joist. And man, Volcraft and New Millennium, I mean, stuff that used to be $1,200 a ton, wound up, at the height of everything, during the rush. And then of course the price increases and stuff, it was $6,000 a ton, $6,500 a ton, not even counting deck or anything like that for concrete pours. It's come back down, but man, they're really digging their heels in. They really like those high margins on that stuff.
I bet they do.
Geez, this stuff is not, that expensive, but
yeah, then the actual mud itself.
Foundation. So you have $200 listed here, material only. Yeah. I imagine that's pretty close. That welded wire mesh really isn't that expensive. No. Or how much of it did you take from work?
Actually, none of that came from work. I did ask if they had any scraps, but they didn't. It was, and really for a 24 by 24 building, I think it took four or six sheets of it, and that was it. But people, number 5 rebar is heavy. If you're going to go get it yourself, make sure you have a heavy duty trailer.
Right. And this stuff comes in 20-foot lengths?
20-foot lengths, yeah. You can have it cut at most yards, but there's a cost per cut.
Yeah, and where'd you get the anchor bolts from? We don't see J-bolts that often anymore. Mostly it's all thread with a washer on the end.
Mm-hmm. I got them from a concrete supply place that our equipment yard buys things through. They're really more for commercial applications than anything, but I had a connection and an outlet, so that's where I got them.
Okay. And then, so the concrete pour and labor. Okay, so you dug the thickened edge slab, placed the rebar. It took you a few days, and then so concrete pour and labor. So you're in for 5160. That's the slab. Obviously the thickened edge, or
that grade on
stem walls, whatever you want to call it, and you hired some guys.
Yeah, I asked around at work because we have a concrete division. And I asked a couple guys if anybody wanted a little bit of side weekend work, and so I had a couple guys out help. It was a big enough slab that I'm not a concrete finisher. I can pour mud, I can do the forming and whatnot, but I'm not a finisher. And I wanted a nice finished surface on the concrete slab with relief cuts and stuff like that. So I hired a couple guys from work that did it on the side for me, that do it for a living. And it was worth every penny. And honestly, the cost of it, it was pizza and beer was most of it.
Right. They're happy to help out. how thick was the slab?
Yeah, it's 6 inch.
It's pretty thick.
Yeah.
How many concrete trucks?
Knew you were going to ask. I forget the yardage on it.
No, we could do the math.
I want to say it was 5 concrete trucks. They were driving over a yard, so they didn't absolutely have max load in the concrete trucks.
And then when you after the concrete was poured, all of this came out, right? All of the forms.
Yep.
And I can't see from the picture, but under here you have nuts holding those down, so it's sandwiched, or are they just suspended?
Here they're just suspended. I didn't want anything. Okay. I didn't want any nut embedded in the concrete.
Okay.
Just the.
So when you were pouring, did they rise up at all, or did you have to push them back down?
Yeah, they were. We went over and jiggled them, and actually used a little a concrete vibrator on them to make
a stinger.
Yep. To make sure that everything was settled really, really well, and there weren't any voids around anything.
All right, jump back in here and get into the actual build. Oh, well, let's talk about the building. What did you spend on the building, the steel package itself, at least from Great Western?
Yeah, I think it was an even $10,000 when I bought it.
Jeez.
Like I said, the price of steel.
We don't do those anymore.
It was a factor of right place, right time, Eric.
Do you mind if I share your actual costs?
No,
I won't share the contract or anything that has, your personal information on it. But
no, that's fine.
Yeah,
I do feel like it was a very, very good value for what I spent. Overall, it went up a lot faster than stick framing. Like when I built my wood shop, that was a lot more work. I built it exactly to match the house, the same James Hardie board siding and trim and colors and everything. And it took a long time. This went up relatively quick.
Now, I'm looking at this picture here. I think I'm sharing it, but I saw another picture where you had like part of the frame lifted up.
Nope. In all of them, the full frames were lifted. So I erected them laying flat on the ground, and then hooked up a spreader bar to the boom spray on the tractor. So we distributed the load. I didn't want to pick them from the
Hold on. What's going on with this picture? You see how there's one rafter and this other rafter that's going up, and that's the same end wall we were just looking at.
Yeah,
Did you take that down?
We were in the process of taking it down because something slipped the chain, or the lifting strap slipped, and those things are pretty bendy when they're up in the air, right? There's nothing giving them any rigidity. So that it twisted.
Yeah, until you have purlins in them. Yeah,
exactly.
Sure.
So something slipped and it went all kinds of wonky. And so we were in the process of laying it back down then to reset. And actually I got the boom lift in there, which again, place and privilege. I borrowed that from our equipment yards, which came in super handy. Even if I couldn't have borrowed one, I'd have rented one. That was fantastic. But it does look like we did actually, now that I think about it, we had that bent fully in place and realized that I had one of the uprights that was supposed to be in the middle bent on the back bent. So we had to take that off, and rather than take the full bent down.
Oh, I got you. You put, so what you're talking about is one of the rafters. So you call them bents. I'd refer to it as a rafter. So you had one of the center mainframe rafters in the wrong spot. So you're just pulling that down to set the other one back up.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Fortunately, we realized that after we only had the first one up and erected, rather than after all three were up.
Right. And I imagine because of the size of the building, and I don't know, I'd have to check the drawings, but I'd imagine that we didn't like half load the frames, or maybe in design we half loaded them, but they got to be pretty darn close and similar in size, because we're kind of at like the minimum of what we can do. And I mean, you got a decent snow load on this thing. It's
we're at 7,500
55 pound roof snow load on it, actually.
Yeah. As required by the county, based upon where we live.
Yep.
And really the only difference were the placement of a couple tabs for things like there was some cross bracing that went in, and there were tabs that were welded on the rafters, and realized that they were in the wrong spot on that frame when we first put it up. But it actually went up really, really quick. Even with that mistake, we had all three in place, and we started to put some of the girts and purlins on just to give it some rigidity, all within, I don't know, a day. This went up relatively quick. It's a whole lot of screws, though.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that.
Yeah.
But what's funny about that one is, well, here, I'm gonna pull up your contract. You could tell tell what you did on the wall panels, and then I'll tell what I did on your roof when we came out to help you.
Yeah, so I got a box of all kinds of different screws, different lengths, different sizes, different colors to match the roofing and the siding, and some of them look a lot fatter, and they weren't self tappers. They kind of look like the chunky caterpillar, right? And I didn't know what the hell they were. I think I even called you and asked you what they were. And you said, "Oh, that's a bag of Goof screws."
Oh yeah, we used to send those out. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. I guess that makes sense. And I didn't think anything of it. Well, then to try to maximize productivity, I stacked my wall panels, and not thinking, just looking at the plans, which had different options for where girt placement would be. I marked and drilled holes for every option where the girt placement could be, not where my girts actually were. So I have one whole side of my building that has a lot of Goof screws in it. I think I actually had to buy an extra bag just to fill all the holes that didn't have anything to screw anything into.
It looks like a tank.
It does look
like all the rivets on like a World War II tank.
Yeah. I don't think I took a close-up of that to admit my mistake, but yeah.
I think it looks pretty, like when we saw it, I was like, man, that actually kind of looks pretty cool.
It does look really cool. It looks tough. It does look like a tank, but it was a goof.
So, and then was it Tyler and I came out there, and actually I think let's see if I can grab the picture. It's in the video, but yeah, look, that's me and you.
Yep. Yeah, that was early on. It was funny. You actually delivered the trailer to my house, and then when you came back to pick the trailer up, this is when you came back to pick the trailer up, that picture actually.
Okay.
I was just setting getting some girts up, and you're like, yeah, you want a hand? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Why not? So you grabbed some tools out of your truck and we got to work, and I asked you, so how long have you been with Great Western? And you're like, no, since I started it.
Oh, I do remember that. You didn't know that I owned the company.
I did not. No.
Right.
I didn't expect the owner of the company to be driving the truck, delivering the trailer. And you guys were super gracious because I couldn't unload the trailer right then and there. So you're like, tell you what, I'll leave the flatbed trailer here. I'll come back and pick it up in 3 days. Just have it unloaded by then. And so that was fantastic. And you came back 3 days later, and then you got to work and help me put up girts.
Okay. That's awesome. I remember, I do remember you being like, wait, you own the company? And I'm like, yeah. Well, yeah, it's the company truck. I mean, there was only, geez, I don't even think we had 30 employees back then. But what actually happened was, this is before Great Western had a manufacturing place. So I was subbing out the manufacturing, and I drove to pick your material up because I was just this whole thing. And, when I dropped it, when I brought it, that's or I guess when I came to pick up the trailer, and it's like, hey, let's hang some girts. I don't want to go home right now. And yeah, it was fun. So the story of that trailer is I wound up giving it to my brother, and because he started a metal building erection company, and they wound up throwing that thing with a 12K telehandler on it, which that trailer's not rated for. That's like a 16,000, 20,000 pound telehandler. They threw it into Turkey Creek on 285 upside down in a ditch. Brand new telehandler too. And this is back when like you could not rent a telehandler. It was like, and I'm like, oh, you took one out of the market. You guys ripped the whole gooseneck out of the back of their truck.
Yeah, they're lucky that's all it did. So the wall panels and the roofing went on extremely quick. I did have a couple questions, Eric, I think, when I was about at that stage right there in that picture. There were some tabs, again, from where you were subbing out the manufacturing. There were some tabs that were in the wrong place. They weren't per the drawings, and things didn't match up, like bolt holes didn't match up. So I took some pictures, and I think I called you, and you're like, well, we can order you another one that's corrected. And I said, well, I have a plasma cutter. I have a welder. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't looking at this wrong. So I just quickly fixed the error and moved on. but I think I had all the wall panels up, with the exception of maybe the front gable end. I think in a weekend.
Right. And then Tyler and I came out to.
I was struggling with the trim.
Yeah. The trim is tough. And we've changed our trim standard here, so the sculpture trim is available to anybody, right? It's a really nice trim, but it could be tough to install.
It was tough
if you've never done it before. The first time I installed it, I had to replace the guy's entire trim on his whole building because it's like we got done and we were looking at it. I'm like, all right, cool. I'll see you next week. I got to order new trim, and it could be tough.
Yeah.
But now we just do a flat trim for anybody that doesn't want to deal with the whole rigmarole of the sculpture trim. And of course, it doesn't cost anything to go to the sculptured.
And the sculpture looks fantastic, but
it looks so good.
Yeah.
It looks so good.
Yeah, what you're seeing there, that void at the top, that's another one of my I grabbed the wrong sheet off the pile and cut it, and then realized it after I installed it, and I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to be short on this one. Fortunately, I had enough of a scrap piece that I just filled that small little triangle at the peak end.
Right, because we do the cover sheets.
Yeah.
And usually those cover sheets are the same color because they're just ran at the same time. But sometimes it's something off the floor. You're like, hey, that works for a cover.
Yep.
Throw it on there.
Yeah, no. So fortunately, this was a cover sheet and it was in good condition. It was the same color. So I just cut a small triangle. I did cut some steel strips just to reinforce the joint because it didn't land on a girt.
Right.
But yeah, you can see it there.
Yeah, we can kind of see it up there.
Yeah.
Still work out great. And this sculpture trim in this picture.
Oh, it looks fantastic.
Is fabulous. When Tyler and I came out, it's like, hey, we're going to help you throw the roof on. I go out and I'm just, confident. I know what I'm doing. No problem. I've done this 100 times. I measure everything out. We throw up the first roof panel and I had already drilled the whole slope. And I remember I looked down at you and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did it. Right. I had in my mind, so there's a gutter offset and then there's, a non-gutter offset and you don't have gutters. And I did the gutter offset just out of the top of my head. And I was like 3 or 4 inches off on I think it was every one.
It might've been
like all of the purlins on one slope. And fortunately we had the extra goof screws or something, or I went back to the office and grabbed them and I'm like, you were so gracious about it. You're like, hey,
I was just glad that I wasn't the only one to make the mistake.
I felt so bad.
Well, and I think you even said, it's not that big video on the wall, but on the roof, it's really bad. I think you even offered to get me some new roof sheathing.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, we should probably just replace the roof sheets, but that takes a couple of weeks.
It does, and I, nights and weekends, I wanted to get it done, and I was always going to spray foam it with the closed cell high density foam anyway, which adds an element of waterproofing. So I really wasn't that concerned about it.
It does void the panel warranty.
What's that?
That's not my warranty. That's the warranty from Ternium.
The Goof screws or the spray foam?
The spray foam. Because if there's a leak up there, it can rot out the panel from underneath. Like if you just see like that little pinprick. We've never had a claim on it, and I think that it's the panel company's in cahoots with the fiberglass company. So they're like, no, you can't use spray foam. You have to use fiberglass.
I put 2 inches of spray foam in the walls and the ceiling of that building, and you can heat it with a candle.
I checked the contract. It was $10,550. Then you add a change order to add the garage door and the personnel door. And then which I wish I could buy garage doors for that price again.
I don't remember the permit cost on this. I tried to dig up the paperwork, but I couldn't find it. So I forget what the permit cost on it was. I do have something listed in there under permitting. I think it was $1,900, and that was kind of silly.
Yeah.
I don't know how we ended up there. So I had gotten to the point where I called in for my, my rough inspections, rough electrical, rough framing, all that good stuff. And the inspectors came out from the county. They signed off on it. And it wasn't until I finished everything, I had the building completely done, I called in for my final inspection, and they're like, oh, sorry, sir, we can't schedule that. I'm like, well, why not? I'm like, well, we don't have a survey on file for where you're going to place your building. I'm like, where I'm going to place my building? You mean where my building is? You've already done the rough inspections. How did we get here? And they didn't budge. They admitted that it was their error, but they weren't budging. And I had to frantically scramble to get a surveyor out to my house to do a survey of my property.
Just verify what they had already approved. Oh, you and I were talking about this.
Yeah.
What would have happened if it was a foot off? You have 25-foot setbacks, right?
25 on the back and the sides and unincorporated Larkspur, yeah. And 50.
And if it wound up being 24, it's like...
They're like, oh, you got to move the building.
Mistake.
Either move the building or file.
Just move it. Just pick it up and move it. No big deal.
Well, and the lady told me that. And I'm like, give me somebody else to talk to because I don't think you realize what you're saying. I can't pick this building up and move it. The other option was to file for a variance with the county, which that's just a suck hole for time. It would have probably been approved if it was only like 6 inches or a foot inside my setback. But I was well outside my setback, and anybody who came out, even without a tape measure, could see that I was well outside my setback.
Yeah, you just like walk it off.
But it cost me almost $2,000 to have a surveyor come out and tell me what we already knew.
Man, and now was that a cost that you should have incurred previously, or is this like an emergency cost to get the CO?
Well, the guy probably charged me a little bit more than he normally would have because I said, "Can you get out here tomorrow?"
Yeah, no problem. Here's the bill.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're $465. I mean, a lot of this savings. I mean, this is not a wild amount of money for what? 20?
Nope.
And there's scales of economies here. I mean, you're only 600 square feet, but that is a chunk for 600 square feet, but it's not going anywhere.
Oh, it's
that's for sure.
It's bomb proof, and it's been a fantastic building.
Right, and you did all of the electrical yourself too.
Yep. Yeah, I even removed the main disconnect off the pole, pulled the meter, put a feed-through panel on it because I didn't want to tie into the house. So when I'm running my 240 volt equipment in the steel shop, it doesn't dim the lights in the house. It's basically got its own separate service.
You got a 100 amp or a 200 amp?
I put 100 amp in that shop. I'm just a one guy operation, so I'm not running everything at once. But I saved a ton of money doing the electrical myself. That's probably one of the bigger savings. Electricians are horribly expensive.
And you did the spray foam before you put your liner panels on?
After.
Oh, that's what I meant.
No. I take
spray foam first and then put the liner panels on?
Yep.
Okay, so the main where the power comes in is just on the outside of this
that panel. Yep. I put a 200 amp panel in because I was not going to short myself on the number of outlets or circuits in the building, so I'm never more than 3 feet away from an outlet.
And do you put them all up high above like tool bench level, or do you put them down low?
I put them all up high.
Okay,
they're all above.
That's so convenient. Like at the house in Larkspur, I don't live. It's rented out, but my whole garage is all chest high outlets. Mm-hmm. It's so convenient.
Yeah, but I've got several 240 volt outlets in there for like compressors and the plasma table and the plasma cutter and my welder. And they're put in strategic locations. So I've got one over by the door, the big overhead door. So if I need to cart my welder, my plasma cutter, do something big outside that won't fit in the building, I've got it right there by the overhead door.
Yeah, that's convenient. And I like this picture. That's not OSHA certified, man.
No, it's not. And I'm not wearing my PPE either.
I like this. What's going on with the what is this truss boom that's on the? Did you build that or did you?
Yeah, I cobbled it together out of steel laying around. His tractor didn't have enough lift, so he did have the forks, so we built that little carriage that slid onto his forks, and then I built that boom spree off the tip of it, and then I built the spreader bar that's the horizontal 4x4 piece of steel, and that's just to distribute the load on the frame, so it doesn't twist and warp. And
right, that's pretty good. I mean it saved you from renting a 5K or a 6K telehandler,
mm-hmm.
and so this is your neighbor's tractor because you have the Kubota, right?
Yep. Yeah, and he's got a bigger one than that now. But that cost me a bottle of scotch.
Deal. And Man, the trim on this one,
The building is super, super clean. I really like the lines of it. And even though the trim was a bit of a pain in the ass to do, it came out so nice. I also like the fact that the ridge cap is just two pieces. It's not all those individual, like 18-inch ridge pieces. So this came in two sections.
It's not because of the pitch. We can't bend. You have a flat ridge cap up there, right?
No, it was pre-bent, and it came in two 12-foot sections.
No, it's pre-bent, but it's not die-formed to the same profile as the panel.
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah, because the max we can really get out of the machine. So what we do in the shop is we'll take a 3-foot panel and break it to the pitch. We just bend it.
Oh, I got you.
And once you get above 412, it's just too much bending. And so it's kind of a different little bit of a deal.
I actually liked it.
Yeah, it looks good.
And it went up quick. It was only two pieces.
Yeah, Tyler and I did a nice job on this trim. Of course, you were there supervising. Remember?
I think I helped
my
little.
pop a little bit. Yeah. Well, you remember the pop rivet gun that I had?
Oh yeah, I think it was
remember
fantastic.
that? Like, oh man, that thing is sweet.
And
well, right on. So
I had other pictures somewhere and I couldn't find it, but it's like there was one where you're up on the roof and I'm tossing you a tool and somebody took a picture and the tool's in midair.
That's in the video. Remember you did
the drone flight
came out and videoed that. Yeah. I'll have to put a link to that video down there. That was pretty cool. That was like one of the very first customer videos that we did. Justin was pretty proud of that one.
I really can't think of any other pictures. So what's interesting in that first picture, you saw the silt fence that was up. That was another thing that I thought was kind of aggravating. My lot is pretty level, but the county insisted that I pull a drainage, erosion, and sediment control permit. So I had to draw up plans for that. And then I had to put in a 13-foot long piece of sediment fence on my yard. And they sent...
I remember that. It was just like flat ground.
Yeah, and they sent someone from Cass Rock all the way down to Almost Monument once a month to inspect the silt fence to make sure that it was still up.
This was the only section of silt fence, right?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, it was silly. But the one thing also that you can see in that picture, if you look down by like, Eric, where you're kneeling in the top of the concrete slab, I also put a notch in the top of that, the outermost edge of the slab, and that was to accommodate the a little bit of overlap of the side panels.
Yeah, we call it a sheeting notch. So it's 1.5 by 1.5.
Yep.
So your base trim set down in there.
Correct.
So on our plans now, we don't show that, but it's an option. It's in the details.
Mm-hmm.
But it was causing so much confusion when people are setting their anchor bolts. They're, are we measuring from the edge of the sheeting notch, to this? And it's like, we're just going to admit it. And if you want a sheeting notch, do it. But I do remember how square this slab was, or the foundation was, when we got there. I was like, man, this is like within, just the dumb end of the tape measure, just the hook.
Yeah,
going back and forth.
Yeah, I was measuring square with a steel tape, not one of the ones that stretches, and I think I was maybe a heavy 1/8 of an inch out of square, over 20 the diagonal.
Geez, I'd be happy with a 1/2 inch. Back when I was putting up buildings, be like, wow, this is good. It's a 1/2 inch out. We have a big hammer. Okay, so the building was a little bit more than 10,000, 10,550, and then garage doors, and then gear screws, frame erection, the cost of a bottle of scotch. I like that. Then foundation. So with electrical, and you don't have any plumbing or anything in there. There's no water.
No, that entered it into a completely different category as far as the county was concerned. It was no longer a barn. It was something altogether different. And the permit fees, oddly enough, went through the roof. I did remember that.
Oh, just by bringing water over.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you bring water in, you got to get water out, right? They want a sewage out.
Yep.
Yeah, a good piece of this is electrical. Miscellaneous. No real capture costs here, but you're certain there's odds and ends. Yeah, so like hammer sets for the base angle, stuff like that.
Cut off wheels for the grinder and stuff like that. And
Right. So spray foam only cost you $1,000. How'd that work out?
So interestingly enough, it was the relative of somebody that I worked with who was just getting into the business. And he offered me a hell of a deal on it and he wanted to take pictures of it after it was done so he could use it for marketing. I was like,
Really?
sign me up.
Sold?
And he gave me the option of that tan colored or a green color spray foam. So I went with the green. So the tan stuff, after it ages, it turns kind of a pukey color, which I didn't want. So
Was it your building? I think it was, where they sprayed the foam when it was cold.
And they had the salamander heaters in there. And I came running out.
Yeah, she had like two different, like it was different colors, or it bubbled up different, right?
It bubbled up a little bit different, yeah.
I remember seeing that.
But I also remember they had the salamander heaters in there to keep the temperature up inside the building, and there was smoke pouring out of the building. I was like, how can the place be on fire? And it was just the overspray and the fumes from the spray foam getting sucked into the diesel salamander heater, then getting blown out the.
Oh, geez, and those guys are in there huffing that?
Well, they had respirators on, and
okay.
But they did have to come out at one point because it was so thick you couldn't even see.
Oh my gosh!
And that was with the windows and doors open.
It turned out to be a really, really, really darn nice building, man.
Yeah, and I think we had one of your other prospective customers come out and actually looked at the building and talked with me, because he was on the fence about whether or not he was going to go with the steel building or not. And you sent him my way, and he came out and took a look at it. I don't know whatever came of that, but he was super impressed with the fit and finish of the building. And when he left my house, it seemed to me like he was going to pull a trigger.
No, I remember I remember the customer. So I went out at his job site too, and he wasn't Canyon City.
Oh, was he from that?
Yeah, he was down south, and he built this building, and I remember he was like, "Hey man, the frames and the purlins, it's all messed up, right? Like these purlins down at the bottom of the rafter aren't fitting. Everything at the top fit." And I went out, and it was the old A-B punch patterns that we used to use, these one size fits all thing. And he had set his purlins on the peak, and he just, by happenstance, they just slid into place, but they were 3 inches out of place, or 4 inches, a 4-inch gauge. But the way the rafter was leading, so he didn't check his measurements. Mm-hmm. And as he worked down the slope, each purlin started getting harder and harder to install until he got to like his last two purlins. They were, I think it was a 60-foot wide, and they would just not go in. I was like, "Hey man, you need to go and pop all the bolts at your purlin on the top. I think you have a frame that's leaning out like this." And really, really nice guy. And he when I showed up, I walked straight up, and I was like, "Dude, your rafter is bowed. I can see what's going on." And he's like, "No, we checked it. I have, these guys here." And I'm like, "All right." And I climb up on his rafters. I start popping all of these bolts, and I popped one, and everything goes, and I'm like, "There you go." And he was really, really cool guy. He's an older guy. Not too old, maybe
careful.
50.
Careful.
Yeah, so, hey, I'm almost 45 now, so
well, I wish I was only 45.
Well, that was awesome for you letting him come out, but yeah, he wound up being really happy. That was a spec property. He sold it for $1 zillion. I don't remember. He's like, "Oh, this is the first one. We're selling it." And he called me. Oh, it might have been a couple of years ago. I don't know what he's doing now, but it's like a whole community up there, up in the mountains above Canyon City. Mm-hmm. And I think this was like the central area for a group of houses that had a community storage barn or something.
Gotcha.
Yeah, pretty cool building.
Yeah, I mean, this was my first all steel building. I've done, I've slapped steel siding on a pole barn and stuff like that before. This was my first all steel building. And I got to say, I would 100% do it again.
You had a couple of gripes in there. I want to talk about that. Well, the big gripe was a real pain in the ass, Douglas County. Yeah. Trim. No idea that it would be that complicated, but yeah, we came out and helped you out.
Yeah.
It's really the hard part about that trim is that it comes in such long lengths and you're trying to hold it on. It's one of those things where it's really to do it nice. And what's funny is I have, professional contractors or erectors that go out and they just butcher things. But I have like first-time homeowners that do it perfectly. I have some pictures from some customers where I'm like, man, I wish I could do it like that. It's beautiful.
It was really the front rake trim, and then the eave trim was fine. It was the corners. It was where the two came together. That was the real. I was like, I'm looking at the drawings. I'm looking at the details, and I'm like, I think I'm gonna give Eric a call.
Right. Yeah, they got to be mitered, and even with the corner box, it's all got to be brought into line, and that's why we've changed to just that flat for our standard trims. Unless somebody asks for the sculpture, we just gone to the flat because anybody and everybody can make that look good. Where I have a video on the YouTube channel that shows like one of the first times I did it, and it's bad. It's just, but if you have the time and you're willing to make the call, we can walk people through it. But it's probably the hardest part of the building. I mean, I always tell people that the fun part is the frame. The heavy iron, the girts, the purlins, because it goes so fast. You get done, you look up, but that's when the real work starts.
Yeah, and that's the other point. I can see people jumping into this, thinking, "Oh yeah, I can throw up a steel building," and it is not like buying a desk from IKEA. I think I even put that in there.
Yeah, that's exactly what you put in.
There's a lot of manual effort, and as well as these things are engineered and manufactured, there's going to be some modifications. You're going to have to tweak something. I almost promise you that. Whether it be due to the manufacturing process or due to a mistake that you made, like all those Goof screws. So you got to be able to think on your feet and problem solve. But there's a lot of manual effort involved. Things aren't light; they're heavy. The steel sheets are awkward and sharp. So unless you got a crew of guys that are willing and able to come and give you a hand, I did the lion's share of this. I did by myself.
Right.
And you had to figure out ways to, move a 12-foot sheet by yourself into place without bending it, smashing it, bashing the corners, or cutting your hand off.
Right. Or dragging it across the other sheet where it scratches. Yeah. Well, it turned out really nice. It all went perfect. Everything was perfect, spot on.
There is one thing I would do different. I'd have got a bigger building.
That's what everybody says. Like, if you have a 40 by 60, you're going to fill it up.
Yeah. I'd have got a bigger building.
Back to the price here, which is what everybody, anybody that's watching this, that's what they want to know. Okay. So we spent 10, 11, 12 grand, something like that on the building, $1,000 on parts, a ton of labor on the weekends and stuff, but it seems like there's a labor to love. $6, $7 grand on the foundation, but you did a lot of that yourself. Right. Otherwise it would have been
more. Yeah, for sure.
It would have been double that. Yeah. I'm sure. I always tell people, and hey, for anybody that's watching this, you have a $20,000 metal building, a $40,000 metal building, whatever it is, you want to talk about foundation, especially now post-COVID, double the price of your metal building. That's the cost of the foundation. Unfortunately, it is what it is. But it's a true foundation. The thing's never going anywhere. It's not a pole barn. Go for it. They're awesome. But it's poles in the ground. I mean, it depends on the pole barn, I suppose. But
this thing is bomb-proof.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere. And it looks beautiful. But
so I think my total cost, what was I, like 21, 22, something like that?
You were off on the building price too. You just wrote 10,000. It was
10.5.
10.5
plus the change order,
plus the garage door and the two windows and the
the two windows were in.
Actually, I gave you the personnel door for free. I'm pretty sure, didn't I?
So the personnel door, the main door, was on the trailer, and it was for a different customer. And when you came to pick up the trailer, I had put the door back on. You said, just put the door back on the trailer and strap it down. And
I had already shipped the other customer the door.
And you're like, the guy was in a hurry. I shipped him another door. Do you need one? I said, Sure. I was just going to buy one from Home Depot, but the steel door that you provided was far superior to anything I'd have gotten at Home Depot. So
Yeah, that's one of those cannonball kits. Those are nice. But hold on, let's put just some disclosures here. If you buy a metal building from Great Western, you might get a free door, but
there's no guarantee.
probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it works out, well, it probably would have cost more for me to ship that door to the other customer.
Well, I think you even said that. You're like, for the cost of what it's going to, it turns out to be a wash. And nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Eric likes bourbon too. Right? You get him liquoring up enough, and you might get some free stuff.
Right. Same goes for Keith. He'll come over with his Kubota and his plasma table and help you out.
Yeah.
Right. So right on, Keith. So okay, so $22,000. You're all in on this thing. Seemed like a deal. It was a good bit of work, but yeah, we're pretty happy, right?
Oh, extremely happy, and for what I wanted the building for. It's more than a hobby shop for me. So I'm in there doing legit work and selling to customers. It's exactly what I was looking for. Cool. So I couldn't be happier.
Right. You're not throwing sparks into the sawdust from the wood shop.
No, I've not set any fires in that since I built it.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Eric Beavers, founder of Great Western, and we just heard from Keith about his 24 by 24 metal building. And yeah, Keith, thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you, Eric.
This was awesome. I hope everybody, anybody that watches this, I hope they learn a few things, and it makes it not quite as scary to go ahead and do it yourself, right? You're able to get through this pretty well unscathed.
Absolutely.
Right on. All right, Keith, we'll see you later.
All right. Thanks, guys.